The Rebel Capitalist Show.
What is your strategy for knowing when to sell? I think that's, as investors, we get so hyper focused on what business to buy and if it's going up or down in price. And then we forget that, okay, if it doubles, well, great, but what do you do? Do you keep it? Do you sell it? Or so what's your strategy for knowing when to sell?
Very good point. So I tend to have a strategy where I trim positions as they're going up.
Okay.
But I have a very strict rule that before I even buy something, I want to know in what circumstances I will sell. So I have an exit strategy before even entering an investment. And that's across the board. But with value stocks, obviously, if I'm buying them cheap, what I'm looking at is not just the price. I'm measuring the operational metrics of the business. I mean, that's really what I'm focused on. And as long as the business continues to do what I thought it would be doing when I made the initial decision, in other words, it's continuing to generate an acceptable return on capital, that's kind of my benchmark. And if the price of the stock is going up, obviously that means that you can no longer buy that business at a low multiple. But as long as the business continues to generate great returns on capital and there's nothing that's a red flag in terms of the operational environment, I'm comfortable to hold. Now, that said, as a fund manager, you do have to bank profits from time to time, and there's going to be people that are going to be looking to redeem from the fund, so you need some cash lying around. And traditionally, my strategy has been to take partial profits along the way if we've had a good rally in something. So, rules of thumb people use, if it's doubled, take your initial capital off the table, stuff like that. I'm not necessarily thinking in those terms with value stocks in Africa, but certainly in terms of mining stocks, mining exploration companies, that's what I tend to do.
Okay.
You need to be able to hold things that multi-bag to really make the big money in these markets over the long run. So hopefully I won't have to sell too much along the way, and we can all be long-term investors and do well. But very much trimming positions is my strategy.
I think the key there is you're buying these stocks as though you're buying the entire business.
That's right.
We always hear, oh, well, sure, Ben Graham tells us to do that, Warren Buffett tells us to, but no one really does it in practice. They just get hyper focused on buying a stock certificate, and that and hopes that next week it goes up, and they've quote unquote made a good decision. But I always use the example, and I think I've got a huge edge here just from a mental standpoint, because I was an entrepreneur all the way up into 2012 when I retired. And I always use the example of a McDonald's. And I would never, if I was going to go buy a McDonald's, I would just look at the P&L. I don't even know if I'd be concerned with the balance sheet too much, depending on, because we won't go into that. But I'd start with the P&L. And I'd say, okay, well, how much money are they making? What's coming to their bottom line every single year? And then how much money would I have to borrow to buy this or use cash or whatever? And you calculate. And then you buy it because you're buying the entire business. If the broker came to me in 2 weeks and said, oh my gosh, you know what? I just analyzed this business again, and I think that you could get an extra 10%. Like, are you going to sell the McDonald's? No, you just bought it 2 weeks ago.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. And then what are you going to do with the money? It's a game of hot potato in that case. So if you own a great business, why would you sell it? So it's very much so. Yeah.
So you talked about what your mindset is for selling and that you're looking at the fundamentals. Am I correct to assume it would be the same for when you exit a position because it's just not working and you're like, okay, I made a mistake and the fundamentals go against you. Now all of a sudden they're doing, the change management or something, and then you're like, okay, I need to pull the ripcord here on this one.
Yeah, so it's probably even more important to have an exit strategy for error trades. And it's the same criterion. So I may have made a mistake in my analysis and thought that the company had a durable competitive advantage, but along comes a competitor and there's a price war, and all of a sudden the returns on capital that the company I bought is generating is half of what I had predicted my long-term analysis, and then obviously I would sell the position and move on to the next one. And I guess the other point about when to sell is, if you're a value investor, there may be stuff that's even better value than something you bought 5 or 10 years ago, which is re-rated,
right.
and then you might rotate. But I'm only looking to hold between 10 and 20 businesses. That's really my objective here. So I have a universe that's just under 500. 496 was what I said earlier, and I'm really probably that's narrowed down to about 60 or 70 that are in my continuous monitoring universe for research. And of those 60 or 70, I only want to own 10 or 20 at any one time.
Then you just watch them very carefully.
Yeah, that's right. So it's about monitoring the businesses more than the price. Everyone is fixated on price in the stock market, which, that's the seductive thing. The number changes minute by minute. And everyone, that's all anyone ever asks me is about price. They never ask me about, well, how's the company you bought into doing? That's the real question. Is the cement company that you bought 2 years ago in Tanzania, bringing home the bacon? Is it delivering on what you thought it did? And that's what I'm focused on.
Exactly. But it goes back to the McDonald's. If you
exactly.
Like if you and I, if I just met you at a dinner party, we're having a beer, and you're like, I own a couple McDonald's franchises. I'd say, oh, great. Well, how'd you do last year? How much money did you make, or how much profit did your profits were up by 10% or whatever? You wouldn't say, oh, you know what? I had my business broker evaluate the business, and I could sell it for 20% more than I paid for it.
Silly,
nobody.
But
does
that's what
that.
people do in stocks. I just don't get it.
All right.
But it's a structural thing,